It is the second day of the 44th National Team Championship 2025. I lost the first game in the very first day against a Grandmaster, and today is the second day, and I'm going to showcase two of my games that I played today with the black pieces. It is going to be very much fun and very much insightful, I believe, to help you guys to understand how players think during the game of chess, and it is going to be very entertaining. So let's begin. So in the round number 2, I am facing a rated opponent who is having the rating of 1754 and my rating is 1780. I am playing with the black pieces and he opens the game with 1d4. I replied with knight to f6, knight to f3, d5, and now we have the move bishop to f4. We have the London system on the board. Okay, so white can also go for playing the move c4, transposing the game into the queen's gambit maybe, but instead he played the move bishop to f4, and now the usual way for black to continue the game is to play c5, and the point here is to play knight c6, queen to b6. For example, e3, knight c6, c3, queen b6, and this is one of the lines that are very popular nowadays, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. And if queen b3, you can play c4, take, and you are having this open a file with the idea of b5, b4, and black is pretty happy. But instead I decided to play the move e6 in this position, and the idea is very solid. My idea is to play bishop to d6, c5, queen c7, b6, bishop a6, trading this bishop with this bishop. That's how you should play this particular opening. So after e6, my opponent played the move c4, which is already a new move personally to me. After c4, my first reaction was to simply capture on c4, and actually this is the best move. But I was thinking after queen a4 check, I can play bishop d7, queen c4, and I was already feeling quite fine for white. But instead, at the place of playing bishop d7, I can play the move knight to d7, queen c4, knight to b6, and actually not knight b6 but c5. Knight b6 was the move that I was thinking, but c5 is the move which gives a pretty good advantage to black in this position, simply attacking the pawn in the center. And the king is also in the center. I'm trying to open up the center, which makes maximum sense. If white takes, I can capture with the bishop and my pieces are very active. And instead, if white tries to play something like e3 protecting the pawn, I can already play something like a6 trying to play b5, or even b6 bishop b7 is a very comfortable idea for black. But instead, at the place of capturing the pawn on c4, I decided to play the move c6, trying to go for a more solid approach, having a very solid structure. White decided to play the move e3. I played the move knight to d7, bishop to e2, knight to h5, simply going for the f4 bishop, because you see f4 bishop is currently a very strong bishop looking at this particular diagonal. So my idea was to simply get rid of the bishop. Now we have knight to e5, which is already a very unexpected move from him. I was expecting him to go bishop g3. I can take on g3, edge g3, and maybe g6, bishop g7 can be played, maybe h6, bishop d6 can also be one of the ideas. But instead, he decided to play the move knight to e5. I decided to take the bishop, e into f4, and now I played the move bishop to d6. Maybe bishop d6 is not a great idea. Maybe I should have took on c4. Maybe queen c7 is also a fine idea. But maybe bishop d6 is not that of a great move, because I'm kind of committing the bishop on d6. As if I play something like queen c7, my possession is very flexible. I'm having many options of bishop e7, bishop d6, even bishop b4 checks available, and the possession is very solid for me. If white tries to castle up, I'm already having a move like f6, attacking the knight. The knight have to go on d3 to protect the knight on f4, but now I can simply chop off the pawn on c4 and I'm already better. Instead I played the move bishop d6. Opponent played the move queen e2, trying to defend the f4 pawn, because my idea is still the same of going f6. So queen d2, short castle by white, and now I decided to take on c4, because it's already a bit hard for me to find a good move in this particular position. I wanted to play something like queen c7, but I was thinking the opponent can play rook c1 in the future, putting some pressure on my queen, and I was not really liking the fact of having pressure on my queen. And I wanted to play the move b6, bishop b7, trying to develop my bishop, but whenever I try to play b6, the opponent can simply chop the pawn on c6. So instead of playing the move b6, I decide to finally take on c4. And now the opponent is having an isolated pawn on d4. And now first a4 by opponent. a4 is a move that is still mysterious to me. Maybe he thought that whenever he takes on c4, I am having the move b5. But bro, you can simply take the pawn on c4 with the knight as well. The bishop is attacked, the bishop goes back, maybe you can simply play rook d1. And white is having a very comfortable position, to be true. Even bishop f3 makes sense. I cannot really push the b6 pawn because the c6 pawn is hanging. But instead of capturing the c4 pawn, he decided to first play the move a4, stopping b5, which was kind of unnecessary. Knight to b6, knight c4, bishop c4. And now I decided to play the move queen to f6, attacking the pawn on f4. The only way to defend the pawn is to play the move g3, and now I played the move rook to d8, getting the rook into the game, putting pressure on the isolated pawn. And I'm now already having many ideas with bishop c5, putting pressure on the queen, as the pawn cannot capture the bishop because the queen is hanging. So in the game, first white played the move queen to e3, because if white tries to play something like rook d1, I'm already having a very powerful move, bishop c5. You cannot capture the bishop, the queen is hanging. And anyways, I'm going to capture this pawn on the next move with a very comfortable position. So queen e3 makes sense. Bishop c7 goes back, and now the idea is to simply play bishop b6, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. Rook d1, bishop b6, and now white can no longer protect the d4 pawn. So we have knight c3, rook cross g4, which is a very critical and the only move. If I try to take with the bishop, it turns out to be a blunder because of knight to e4, a very strong move, because it simply attacks my queen. If I try to go back with the queen, I'm losing a complete bishop, and that's game over. And if I try to capture the queen, knight into f6, and that's a check. I have to take it back, and you see the rook on d8 is hanging, and the opponent is going to be a piece up, not a piece up, but a complete rook up with a completely winning position. So that is why bishop d4 was a blunder. I played the move rook d4, which is the only move. Knight to e4, and now at the first glance the things look too complicated, but nothing is happening. Basically, the point here is, like, if I try to go back with the queen, once again I lose a piece in the end of the day. Yeah, so I have to take on d1, that's the fourth move. Rook cross g1, and now we have queen e7. Because I cannot really capture the queen. Look, okay, I can capture the queen, but knight cross f6 check, g cross f6, and white can give a check, king g7, f cross e6, f cross e3, and I'm not really loving this particular position. This is exactly what I thought, and I was thinking like my pieces are kind of logged in, and I can't really play for a win over here. So that's why I decided to play the move queen e7, keeping the material on the board. Now queen to d2, and now bishop to c7. So basically, if I just give a free hand to white in this position, he would love to play something like queen d6 or knight d6. So that is why bishop c7, with the idea of playing b6 and developing my final piece, the bishop on c8. So yeah, after bishop c7, the opponent decided to play knight to d6, and here, with a thorough calculation, I decided to chop everything on d6. King f8, because I was simply getting a back rank mated. So king f8, rook d8 check, king e7, rook g8, g6, king f1. And in this position, I thought that the opponent might play at g4 in this position with the idea of rook h8, and I can no longer protect this pawn. But actually now I can play b6, rook h7, bishop b7, sacrificing this pawn, and I believe this position would have still been interesting to play. But after rook d8, I believe I'm still having a lot of counterplay with a very good position. So that makes sense. The opponent played the move king f1. I instantly pushed the pawn to h5, king e2, and now it's time to play b6, develop the bishop on b7, and eventually in the endgame, I'm a pawn up with a completely winning position. If opponent tries to play bishop a3, a6, I can simply capture the bishop, give a check, and capture the rook. I can also play bishop b7, forcing the opponent to trade off the rooks, and I'm still winning the game. So instead, opponent played the move king e3, bishop b7, trading off the rooks, h4, and now I'm just a clean pawn up with a very interesting position. First c5, opening up the bishop, keeping the pawns on the dark square. Bishop goes to d3, king d6, f3, bishop c6, bishop c2, f5, and I personally love the move f5. It looks like, why am I putting the pawns on the light square? But guys, after f5, the opponent is having absolutely zero counterplay, and there is no chance for the white bishop to enter in my camp and try to attack these pawns. That's nearly impossible. So after f5, opponent played bishop d1, a6. I tried to get my king, push the pawn, king d5, takes check, and you see now I'm simply having a clean pass pawn, and I just went in, take, bishop over here, bishop to d5, and I'm going to capture this pawn. So opponent played bishop d1, b3, king, bishop to e2, b2, and my opponent decided to resign the game. Why? Because that's pretty simple. I want to make a queen. If opponent tries to go over there, I can simply get in with my king, capture everything over here, and make a queen. And if opponent tries to get the bishop, trying to cover this, bishop a2, and I can simply make a queen, and that's game over. So that's the reason after b2, opponent decided to resign the game. And with this game, I finally won the second round, and now it's time for me to play the third round, which is going to be very interesting. So let's check it out. Okay, so now discussing the third round, which is the final round of the second day. I'm already kind of tired and sleepy because the previous game went too long, but okay, I have to play. I'm playing with the black piece as my opponent is 2-1-3 rated player. He's playing with white. He starts the game with 1 knight f3. I played the move knight to f6, b3, c5, bishop to b2. So maybe I would say this is an unorthodox opening, basically developing the bishop on b2. You can call this as a ready opening because the opponent has started with a knight to f3. So I first played c5, bishop b2, e6, e3, knight c6, d4, b6. A very interesting setup for black. I want to develop my bishop to b7, bishop to e7, and castle up. Bishop e2, bishop b7, castle, cd, ed, and you won't believe it, but I played the move d5. And a funny thing about this particular position here is after d5, this was the position where my preparation ended. Basically, after the second round, I went home, and when the pairings got uploaded on the official website, I tried to find the games of my opponent, and I was just looking through the engine, and this was the position the engine was giving me. But after d5, I personally felt like during the game, the moment I played the move d5, I realized the bishop on b7 is simply bad. How to continue the position is a very, very interesting question to be true. Like, currently the bishop is pretty happy, and one way to continue the position is to simply play bishop e7, castle up, put the rook on c8, and I'm already having a very comfortable position. But after d5 kind of chugged in, I'm not really sure what the bishop on b7 is doing. White decided to play with knight to d2, bishop to e7. From this point onward, I'm completely on my own. a3, short castle, bishop d3. So the opponent is trying to play a slow chess, trying to slowly and steadily improve his position, which makes a lot of sense. Rook c8, queen e2, rook e8. Maybe rook e8 is fine, makes sense. Let's keep it as a move, because my idea was to play bishop f8, g6, bishop g7, and have a very safe king. b4. So particularly b4 was a move that I was kind of confused. I did not see any particular good point of playing the move b4. b4 only weakens up the c4 square. b4 makes the b4 pawn a target in the future in the endgame, and I personally did not love the move b4. I decided to play the move bishop f8, simply continuing with my plan. Knight to e5. Maybe at the place of bishop f8, I should have played the move bishop d6, which is a bit more active square for the bishop. But instead, I played the move bishop f8, knight to e5, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, rook to d1. And now we have knight to d7. You won't believe, but after rook to d1, I took a lot of time in this particular position, because to be true, it's pretty hard to play with the black pieces. Like, you are not really having any natural move to continue the game. And like after the game has been ended, one of my friends recommended a very interesting idea, which is to play knight to e7, knight f5, knight d6, and you see the knight can jump on c4, and that makes a lot of sense. The queen can go on c7 with the idea of knight e7, knight f5, knight d6, knight c4, and that makes a lot of sense. And I personally loved this idea. Maybe bishop c6, bishop a4, putting pressure on the c2 pawn can also be a very interesting idea. In the game, I was kind of confused. I played the move knight to d7, rook e1, and now we have knight to b8. And to be true, it's pretty hard to continue the position. If I try to play knight e7 in this particular position, it's already a blunder, because many sacrifices are coming up for white, like knight f7. I have to take, and a knight to g5 check. King goes to g8, queen e6 check. King f8, it's a check. King g8, knight h6 check, king h8, queen g8 check, and that's a standard mate on h8. Instead, that's the reason, sort of a reason, I played the move knight d7, rook e1. I played the move knight to b2, which is a very bad move. But I was thinking maybe after knight b8, okay, I'm not really sure what was the idea, but maybe a6 b5 is the idea, because after knight b8, I'm kind of covering the a6 square. So I want to play a6 b5, but that's too slow. We have h4, takes, a6, h5, b5, bishop to c1, getting all the pieces on the king side, and I was already very low on time. Knight to d7, bishop to f4, knight to f8, trying to defend. If I try to go for playing knight b6 with the idea of knight c4, opponent is already having many powerful moves in the position. Maybe bishop g5, bishop f6. Believe me, position is very bad. At least knight on f8 kind of defends the king, so that makes sense. Bishop g5, queen c7, knight h2. The idea is to get the knight on g4, h6. H6 is a move that I played out of desperation, because after knight g4, I was not really able to find any good way for me to continue the position. So I decided to play h6, which is actually the best move. Bishop goes back, and now just g5, f4, f6, and suddenly my king is completely opened up with completely losing position for me. e5, h6. Okay, h6 personally I did not love the move. I was thinking knight g5, maybe e4, h6, push, maybe h7 check. But okay, this is not a great idea. Instead, the opponent played h6. I took the pawn, knight e5, rook c7, knight goes back, rook e7, trading off the rooks, takes, rook g7, knight goes to f3. I push the pawn because the knight cannot capture the pawn. I can take the pawn on g2, and I'm having a very much huge counterplay in the position, and I'm pretty happy. So the opponent first played the move king f2, which is a very interesting move. Rook g4, rook e1, knight to g6. Yeah, knight g6. It's a check. I have to play king to g7. It's a fourth move. If I play anything else, if king f7 or king h7, it doesn't really matter, because opponent is having rook e7 check. I cannot capture with the knight because the knight is pinned. Opponent is going to capture the bishop on the next move. And if king f7, maybe, I don't know, maybe just rook b8, and the position is very good for white. I played the move king g7, and opponent took, and I took on f3, because if I try to take with the king, it's a check and I lose the rook. If I take with the rook, it's a check and I lose the bishop. So that's why I took the knight, bishop h5, and now I have to sacrifice the bishop, and now it is a losing position for me, completely losing position, because the opponent is eventually can save the pawn. But now I think after rook b3, how in the world is opponent going to protect the b4 pawn? I gave a check, I came back, the pawn is attacked. We did the same thing, and now the pawn is gone. He played the move king over here, and I took the pawn. But actually this is winning, because after actually king b6, if I go rook b3, opponent can give a check. King h6 attacking the bishop. Opponent can take the pawn. I cannot take over here because of king c5. It's a check and I lose the rook. So that is why, like after take, maybe if I try to capture the bishop, king b5, and this is a winning endgame for white. White just needs to cut off the king, push the pawn, and that's a win. But instead, opponent missed this idea and he played the move king to d5, and I got the pawn. And now in the end he got the 2 pawn, and now we have this particular position which is theoretically draw, but I must know how to defend this position. During the game I got no idea how to defend this position. I got no idea, but now I know the idea. Bishop f7 was played, rook to c8, bishop over here, king over here, bishop over here. So basically now he's trying to use the bishop to make the bridge and try to get the king, trying to corner my king, and that's how he's going to mate me. I tried to centralize my king over here, and I played the move rook f8, but actually the best way to play is to play the move rook d8, cutting off the king. That's the way how you should play. For example, if the rook goes back, I can simply wait. I can just simply play rook over here. It's a check. I can simply go on the dark square because white is having the bishop off the light square. Opponent tries to go over here, I don't care. I can simply play the move king over here. Opponent tries to come, I can just put the king over here. Opponent can give a check, I can go over here. It's a check, I can go over here. Opponent tries to come over here, I can, okay, that's a draw. Basically it's a draw in the end of the day. But instead, in the game, I played the move rook f8. Opponent went back with the rook, gave a check, I came to the corner. One more check, king f6, putting the king on the dark square, king to d6, give a check, and now we have this position. Rook f2, good move. Rook e8, threatening rook f8 and winning the rook. Sort of have to play rook b2, fine move. Rook f8 check, king g7, rook goes over here, and now rook e2 is the best move. I played the move rook d2. Rook e2, just cut off the king. That's how you should play chess. Like if bishop e6, just try to run away. King comes, just try to run away. That's how you should play chess. That's how you should play this endgame. Instead, I played rook d2, king tried to come, gave a check, and once again we have this particular position. Gave a check, and now suddenly you see my king is in the corner. King f8 was a blunder. King h7 would have been the best move. Okay, you should, whenever your opponent is having the bishop rook versus rook, always avoid going to the last rank. Last rank is the most dangerous rank. King f8, and now white is winning. King e6. I played rook h2. King over here, d6. And now I was like, bro, that's a mate. That's a mate. I gave a check and I played the move rook h8. Opponent played the move rook to g3. And I was trying to wonder, how shall I play? If king e8, the opponent can simply move the rook, and that's game over. And maybe I could have played rook h6. Okay, rook h6, it's still losing. In the game, I played the move king e8. Actually, yeah. In the game, I played king e8. Opponent went rook f3. I played the move rook h2. Basically, if the opponent goes over here, I'll simply go back with king f8. That was the idea. Opponent played rook f3, and here I should have played the move something like rook h6, pinning up the bishop, though it's still winning after rook b3, threatening mate. I have to go on f8, and after rook g3, it's kind of unstoppable. Rook h8, king d7, and slowly and steadily it's getting mate. Rook h7 check, king d8, rook h8, maybe rook g4 over here, and basically I'm kind of out of move now. I'm not really having any legal move to make. That's a mate because rook g8 is coming up, and that's game over. Instead, I played the move rook h2, bishop d7, and after bishop d7, I decided to resign the game. Why? Because after king d8, that's a mate in one. I was completely mad at me after bishop d7 check. I simply missed this move bishop d7. The moment I played the move rook a2, rook h2, I simply realized I simply missed bishop d7 and the game is over. Okay, I personally thought the bishop rook versus rook endgame is endgame, which might come 1 or 2 times in my entire life, but this was the day. This was the exact day why you should study endgame. You should always study endgame. Such endgames are the critical concepts that make your endgame skills good, and you must master them. That's very important. Whenever you are playing the endgame in your games, you must know these things. Okay, I learned a very interesting lesson, yeah, in that particular day. So basically, I lost the third game of the second day. Pretty tired, extremely exhausted. The game lasted for maybe 4 to 5 hours. Completely tied up. So yeah, this was the game. I won the second round, I lost the third round. So currently I'm having 1 point out of 3. Let's see how the games are going to be even tougher and tougher, and it's going to be very like many more fun coming up. So I hope that this video, this analysis was pretty insightful. If it was, if you loved the analysis, make sure to like, share and subscribe. I'm going to come up with these more interesting recaps like these. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess. Bye bye.